Welcome to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news and events from New Japan Pro Wrestling over the past week. I'm Stephen Conway, a contributor for Fight Game Media. With me, as always, is fellow Fight Game Media contributor Jeremy Finestone. Jeremy, it's very good to see you again at the most wonderful time of the year, in my opinion. It's G1 time.
It is a fantastic time of year, and I am feeling back at home with New Japan right now. It just feels like Christmas.
It does have a different feel to it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We are 3 shows in. It began over the weekend, and 2 shows in Hokkaido, and they were all pretty entertaining shows. We're going to go through them and talk about them, but there was a little bit of a buzz to them, and you can definitely see that the people that are in the tournament itself, most of them anyway, brought their hard working boots, because we saw some really good stuff, and we're gonna, like I said, go over it. But overall, the first 3 days, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I watched the first show, and it only took a couple of matches for it to be like, this is a special show again, and it just felt like the New Japan energy that had been missing during the pandemic. It feels like it's fully returned. Like the slate of talent that is there and competing with each other and the interactions. It feels like a full strength New Japan Pro Wrestling roster in which they can lay out intricate storylines and the talent can make it work.
Well, we have some motivated stars. We have some people that are really trying to impress, some newbies that are really trying to impress and working very hard. Might want to check, in fact, how hard they're working in some of these preview tags, because some of them were really busting it. But hey, you want to get over. It's your first impressions and things. So we'll get into all that. But the traditional New Japan stars, there are some guys there that have been saving themselves for this, and they brought out some things that we hadn't seen from them in a little while in the last 3 days. And there are going to be some people that are down on this tournament because of the format, because we're not going to see all of the classic match combinations and pair-ups that we would normally see, and that's a fair criticism. I'm not even going to argue with that the 4-block format keeps us away from some key one-on-one matches that kind of make G1. But I think we're going to get a good version of what this is. I don't think anybody's really half-assing this. I've been impressed with the work.
Yeah, there were a couple of matches where like this is not G1 on the level caliber, but it was the best matches that they, as members of the G1, could put out. And that's an important distinction, because everyone in the G1 has a role to play and a story to tell for an overarching reason. And you're seeing it, and there are a couple of matches that you kind of have to get the taste out of your mouth, but they do it early, and then the purpose is truly displayed as to why these individuals are in this bracket after you get past you got a bunch of big monsters.
And we've been they're definitely pounding that into our heads. There's no question about that one. So, well, let's just get right to it. Let's get right to night one. Now, night one, like I said, was in Hokkaido. It was we're going to cover the preview tags after, because the preview tags kind of lead to the next night's singles matches. So we're going to start with the biggies. We're going to start with the 4 matches. I do kind of like the format of seeing one match from each block each night. That's not bothering me at all.
I think that's a great way of doing it. It did not occur to me until I started watching it that every wrestler would not be wrestling linearly, if that makes any sense. What has been made clear when we watching the G1 is that not every wrestler is going to be wrestled on the same schedule as perhaps, like, if you're in the A block and the B block and the C block and the D block, you're not going to wrestle again the same night 4 days later. Everyone has a staggered schedule, which makes everything completely unpredictable. And we have to look at the schedule just to see who is going to be facing off with each other over the next 4 nights. And the unpredictability of that is really kind of exciting. You can't just say, oh, this one guy is obviously going to face one of these 8 guys in this bracket, and it's going to happen within the next 4 weeks. You don't know who's going to be wrestling on one night unless you are paying way more attention than people who are recording a video podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's all out. It's all out there. The schedule is out there. You can look it
Yes.
up on ngpwworld.com. I think it's even on the Wikipedia page now. They have every night's lineup on there, so you can look it up if you want to. But there is a bit of unpredictability to it, like you mentioned. It's not like the A block is in tags while the B block are in singles, and vice versa. And that was the format for a lot of years. So.
I would fail a test. I would fail a test if you asked me who would be on Wrestling in One Night. It would be a Scantron, and I would get 0.0%.
You didn't fill in your circle completely with the number two pencil. The honor of the first singles match in the 2022 G1 tournament went to Hiroshi Tanahashi and Aaron Henare, and Aaron Henare picked up the biggest win of his career thus far. He defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi by pinfall. They've been working very hard to get that full Nelson move over Jeremy. Now, he didn't have Tanahashi tap out to it a little early for anything like that. But Aaron Henare got the biggest win of his career here, and it was in 11 minutes and 11 seconds. Not a whole ton of time right there. Clearly, Tanahashi's knees are absolutely shot, but he's such a smart worker. And really did a lot of work to get over the full Nelson, even though it wasn't the finishing move. The story of this match was definitely that this new devastating full Nelson from Aaron Henare softened up the Tanahashi, and the all-time legend falls to the man making his G1 debut, and Henare off to a strong start with a big win. Now, Chase Owens beat Tanahashi last year too, so this isn't necessarily the launch of Aaron Henare into the stratosphere, but considering where Henare was a couple of years ago, this is a big step forward for him.
I mean, you went from Toa Henare to the probably third singles wrestler in the stable of United Empire, and in the New Japan 2.1, Tanahashi is, putting over talent that is going to be putting over the younger talent. And it was a resounding statement for people who have not checked out New Japan for their first match to be a Tanahashi loss against someone that they were looking at as lower mid-card, perhaps when they were checking it out before the pandemic, or have been lapsed fans. And so you are putting the United Empire in a position where they're going to be looking very, very strong. This is, again, the third guy on the tier in the stable, and he's got a win over Hiroshi Tanahashi in the first round of the G1. You are making deliberate decisions when you do something like that, and credit to Tanahashi of knowing what his role is in New Japan now and his ability to make Aaron Henare look good. He looked like a monster putting Tanahashi in there, and part of that is Tanahashi making Henare look that way. So Tanahashi being in the G1, I hope that he is able to sustain himself. The 6 matches throughout the whole thing is probably going to be a benefit of him, because I don't think they want a Naito situation like happened last year. And so this will prevent that. But I think good things ahead for United Empire, and Tanahashi will continue to have his middling success G1s as he enters this stage of his career.
It's interesting to note that Tanahashi, in the old format, when you had 9 matches, was only winning about 4 each. He was going 4 and 5 the last few years. So it's clear that at least in this format, Gedo uses him for big stuff. I mean, Tanahashi always seems to end up in a big match, and he had that no disqualification match against Kenta at Wrestle Kingdom. He's always going to be part of the big show mix, and of course, he went to Forbidden Door in a key position there. So he's still Hiroshi Tanahashi, but you can tell that Gedo is moving him perhaps, and we'll see how this tournament turns out. Is he heading a little bit toward Satoshi Kojima land as the years go by? And I don't mean that as an insult.
No.
Kojima can still go, but with the role that being that there's a ceiling on who you beat, and he might be headed that direction before too long. We'll see how this tournament turns out, though. The other thing they like to do is to tear Tanahashi down and then have Tanahashi make a Superman like heroic comeback. So there might be one more to make this going. Yeah,
there might be one more of those in Tanahashi, but I do think he's more in the elder statesman role than he is in prime contender role. So that's my thoughts.
Up next is boy, and it was close with the last match, but I think this was my favorite match of the night. Will Osprey defeating El Fantasmo. I love this, and my one criticism over the last few months and maybe even years for El Fantasmo is the comedy stuff that he does in his matches, or what he thinks is comedy with the back raking and all that. And I love this that they got it out of the way early. He raked Will Osprey's back once. Will did not sell it, chopped him right back, and they never went back to it again. Oh. After that, it was just a full-on straight match where Osprey worked a little bit more like his junior heavyweight days, a little bit more. Did the Sasuke special in this one. He doesn't usually pull that one out. I think both looked terrific. The match was fast-paced, crisp, terrific finish. I love this.
This is going to be the Will Osprey show this year, and my God, I watched this and I was like, that was, pardon my French, that was fucking fantastic. So I had radio silence when I was watching all the G1 shows. I kind of wanted to have my own opinion going into this and didn't really want to talk to anybody about this. And then I decided I was going to email the Big Dave Meltzer and tell him all my scores. And so I'm trying to think of like, what was my favorite match night one? And I just like, it's between Osprey and ELP and Cobb and Okada. And I think Osprey, ELP. And I was like, am I wrong? Like, do other people feel this way? And then I looked and realized a lot of people felt this way. It's like, okay, I'm that kind of like confirmation bias in a vacuum. That was how I felt about it. I'm like, was this as good as I thought it was? Okay, it was. This was tremendous. Yeah. It could go down as one of the matches of the entire tournament. It's early to say, but the talent and the caliber and what they did, they set the bar for the rest of the tournament.
They really did. I love the finishing sequence, the going for the Os cutter. El Fantasmo turned it into a backslide, kick out barely in time for 3. Fantasmo goes to protest to the referee, holding up the 3 fingers. Wasn't that 3? And eats a hidden blade where Osprey just pounced on an opportunity. And he looked like an opportunist. El Fantasmo's, arguing with the referee ends up costing him. It's a clean win for Osprey, 2 points. Fantasmo looked wonderful. This loss did not hurt him an iota. Just good stuff. Good, well done by both men.
It is interesting that you could have a dynamic of heel versus heel, because as much as we might discuss it later on, Will Ospreay's still heel right now.
Yeah.
They played to both of their strengths. Neither one of them compromised their characters in putting this match on, and a lot of people would have done that.
But without the time, I really appreciate without the time wasting and the back raking stuff and all that silliness. It doesn't have a place in G1. Doing the preview tags if you want, but I like that he wrestled differently because he understood the situation. Jay White defeated Sonata by pinfall, and that was the next one. This was good. This was a strong match between 2 really good workers. Jay White, one of the best heels in the entire business. He doesn't try to be cool. He doesn't try to be liked, like I'm a heel, but you really like me, don't you? There's none of that from Jay White. He just wants you to hate him, and those fans do. He was in Skull End. He went after the eyes. So he went something that you don't actually see a whole lot of eye gouging in New Japan. So it kind of jumps out as being particularly slimy. You see more low blows than you see eye gouges in New Japan. And he got out of it, turned it into the now I'm going to blank on it. The
Blade Runner?
The Blade Runner. I mean, it's Cody Rhodes does the same move. He calls it the Blade Runner. He catches Sonata in it, nails him with it. And one of Jay's strengths too is that he can get that Blade Runner out of just about the situation. Came out of Skull End into it this time and got the win. Jay moves on. He's the world heavyweight champion. He's going to be booked strong. Sonata is exactly the kind of guy that can make you look strong. So good start for Jay and Sonata for that matter, and loss.
Absolutely. I call Jay the best counter-based wrestler in the world today. His skill is countering other people's moves and then turning it into his own offense. I don't see anybody else better at doing that. And every one of his matches has some type of scouting maneuver. It's just fantastic. The thing about Jay White matches in the G1 is that he's going to be booked so strong. So when that inevitable upset does happen, you're not going to be ready for it, but you are. Like, you're just not going to believe it's going to happen until it happens. Yeah. if it were Okada as champion, you'd kind of expect somebody to take him down. But when you have a heel champion and he's booked as strong as Jay White, if he does go down at some point in the G1 bracket, it's gonna be a storytelling moment, I think.
Yeah, and he's going to make you ache for it because he's going to be such an intolerable jerk until he does take that loss that you're thrilled when it does happen. He's really, really good at what he does. And then we had the other candidate for match of the night after that, Kazuchiko Okada defeating Jeff Cobb. And this was one where you could be forgiven for not going with Okada in this one. This kind of felt like one where they might put Okada behind the 8-ball and have Cobb go over here. Instead, they have a fantastic match. They're doing each other's moves. And this is something that Sam from Power Bombshells tweeted, and I noticed the same thing during the match. Everyone knows that Jeff Cobb is superhuman in terms of strength. It's ridiculous how powerful that man is. Okada was picking up Cobb dead weight and doing things with him too, between the pile driver and actually getting up some of Cobb's moves. He was remarkable too in this match. And Cobb putting Okada on top of the turnbuckle and hitting the Okada drop kick to the guy on top of the turnbuckle. You got to be kidding me. What can't this guy do? This was a really great match, and two guys that are really in stride right now. I could watch these two work each other all day, twice on Sunday. Sign me up. Take my money.
Do you know how hard it is to throw a man towards you or pull a man towards you and then catch him and execute a power move?
Yeah.
When I saw that, I stopped and I replayed it, and I was like, he made that look so easy. Like,
these are big guys. Both
these
of them
are like just wow.
Yeah.
If they hadn't had a series of matches last year, I feel like this would have been a much more anticipated match for me. I think they got it out of the way precisely for that reason, that they had a lot of United Empire, Kazuchiko Okada stuff dating back to last year, all the way to September, June, July, after the Shingo title reign. Okada and Cobb were feuding with each other towards it. So that kind of didn't make it as magical, I guess, as the Osprey ELP match. But I mean, I don't do star rated, but they're so close to each other, it'd be like a quarter of a star less than each other. They're both top tier level matches, and these are the best matches that have aired anywhere in the world in the last week. So there's that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like we talked about at the beginning of the show very quickly, this felt like a G1. This felt like a special night of guys working very, very hard to get this event over and to put over how bad each of their own characters want to win it. It just felt like a G1 again. It was a chicken soup for the soul as far as wrestling goes. So to go over now the preview stuff very, very quickly. I mean, Tom Lawler got a win over one of the young lions, Kosuke Fujita. This was Tom Lawler's first appearance in New Japan Ring. I think the fans it was a quick one. It was just a very quick showcase for him. And he looked good. I think the fans are still trying to figure out what to make of this guy, but that's why
I thought they loved him. I thought they were into him.
I just think they were taken aback by him. So, this is a lot of personality to deal with this dude, which can get over in Japan if you do it correctly. And Lawler's certainly talented. So,
and Roy Heisler too. He was his first appearance as well.
Yeah. He did on night 2, I believe it was. So
he showed up, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he was with him. He was cornered him and things. His first match. But Jonah and Bad Dude Tito defeated Yano and Ryohei Oiwa by pinfall there. That was a Jonah showcase for the most part, and Yano played it like he was terrified of him. And then you had a House of Torture beating the Gorillas of Destiny and David Finlay. Although Tangaloa was not there, it was Jado. That's just a classic warm-up match, and then Bullet Club over Suzuki Goon also in a warm-up match. You also had Chaos over LIJ in a warm-up, and each group now has a guy that's there to kind of lose these falls. So for Hantai and the Gorillas of Destiny, Jado's there, Taka Michinoku's there for Suzuki Goon. Poor Bushi's the only guy in LIJ that isn't protected. And he's the only guy in LIJ that's not heavily protected. And so those guys were there to take the losses, and and keep everybody in the tournament strong. So nobody that was in the tournament ended up taking a pinfall in anything. That's what Young Lions and other guys are for. Any thoughts from those preview tags?
Honestly, it was watching it, getting warmed up. There was a part of me that's like, should I just skip over some of these recap matches because this isn't the discussions that we're having. But you can glean interesting information from the matches coming up, and for the responsibility of the viewers that we love, we ought to make sure that we do all our diligence and all our homework. So we're gonna watch everything, and we're gonna cover it if it's worth covering.
And there were some Easter eggs in night 2, more so in night 1, in those preview tags that were worth noting. So we moved on to night 2, and then we saw the first tournament match there was in the B block, and it was Taichi, the hometown boy. He's from Hokkaido, and he defeated Tomohiro Ishii by pinfall. And this was a terrific match. The bruisers like Goto and Ishii kind of bring out the best in Taichi, I think. He had, and Ishii even worked a little bit bully heelish. There were times when he was being a little, like doing the whole dismissively kicking Taichi in the back of the head, as he's down, or kind of, I don't know, pie footing, like that whole thing where you just put the foot on the head instead of pie facing.
The dismissive,
yeah, your gum on the bottom of my shoes that he's wiping off right there. And that would, of course, get Taichi to properly fire up. And a dramatic rally by Taichi in the end, and he got the win in his hometown. I thought this was exactly what it probably should be.
I'm going to be honest with you. I thought this was the best match on night 2.
Oh, okay.
There were a number of other things with all the other matches that there was like a knock on it. But if you're talking about just a classic G1 match where these guys are hard hitting, telling a story, like you got the hometown boy, you got, Ishii and Taichi, they've done this dance dozens of times. This isn't anything new. This isn't a fresh match. But if you're looking for a top tier New Japan match that doesn't feature the normal guys that you always pay attention to, like the top main eventers, and you want to see the mid card go, these guys went, and it was a solid match to me.
Yeah, it was very good. And Miho Abe is there because it's a big match, and she is a soldier for Taichi. I mean, that was that woman is that act is so great, and she is so good at what she does. She just leads those cheers, and she pounds that mat as just as hard as her little arms allow her to. She is tiny, but she packs a wall up in there, and she keeps that crowd going, and she's so enthusiastic and so into him that it is a little infectious. And of course, like I said, hometown guy, the crowd was into Taichi.
There's an interesting dynamic with those two in that when the pandemic hit, she wasn't around, and Taichi had to get by on his own. And so his act changed a little bit. And as a result, when she came back, they're a better act together as a result, because he's not crutching on her as much. And instead, it feels like they're in cooperation with each other more so than they were in the past. And I don't know if that's just an observation and I'm just making that up in my head, but they both feel like they're on their game with each other more than they ever have before.
Yeah, and this more babyface-ish. I mean, Suzuki Goon's kind of going babyface in its own little weird way, and it suits Miho Abe's character too. Is that, like I said, you didn't want her to be upset, even when he was being a heel. You didn't. She always portrayed somebody as somebody as you wanted to root for. So now that we're all on the same side here, fans, Taichi and Abe alike, it does make the act better. Yeah, I enjoyed this one too. And we go from the sublime to the ridiculous. The next match is Toru Yano and Jonah.
I should have known.
9 minutes.
Should have known.
9 minutes. And the thing is, for a Yano match, it wasn't terrible, but it was a Yano match, so it wasn't great. Yano in this current iteration, the comedy guy, and the doubt started to creep in, Jeremy, when the first 5 minutes went by and it was just beating on Yano and beating on Yano and beating on Yano. And you're just sitting there just thinking, oh, this is going to turn around, isn't it? And by God, we got what we got. What'd you think?
Should have known when Jonah won the tag match the night before.
Yeah, not a good sign, is it?
Well, yes and no. When these big monsters lose early, they're going to be looking. They do it so that mathematically they look strong inconsequentially later on. If you're going to lose to Yano in night one, you're going to have a really good rest of your tournament. I mean, Moxley had a great tournament years ago, and one of his big losses was the Yano haunting. So
that's right.
there is a tool to having Yano lose a match, because when you lose to Yano, your credibility isn't shot the way you would lose, say, if like you lost to Ishii. You know, like those are two different tiers, because people look at you differently in terms of like your contendership as a result, because, you know, like anyone can lose to Yano at any given time. And you know, it's a mathematical procedure rather than a mathematical procedure of convenience, I would say, whenever you have a Yano match in the G1, rather than you know, what people really think of the talent facing Yano.
So, of course, the end came when they were on the outside of the ring. The referee is counting. Bad dude Tito was out there with Jonah, and Yano managed to bait him into charging Yano. Yano steps aside. He crashes into Jonah. Yano then manages to nutshot both of them right in the yam bags, as our friend Taz would say. And Jonah was counted out. So it was one of those little sneaky style things for Toru Yano. And it fine for what it was to put Jonah behind the 8-ball.
I don't advocate for this stuff all the time. I know it's coming in the G1. At least entertain me when you do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So up next was what I felt was the best match of the night. Although the Taichi and Ishii was terrific. Zack Sabre Jr. and Kenta. Really enjoyed this one. The only thing I will say about it that kind of made me cringe a little bit, man, there were just a lot of unprotected hits to the head and the face here that I could have done with a lot less of. They just smacked each other open-handed and things, and that's, you know, I just don't know if we need to be taking unprotected shots to the head like that so much, but it was a terrific match, though. As always, you know, they went with the whole Kenta believes he's the best technical wrestler in the world. Zack thinks he's the best technical wrestler in the world, and they went at it with that in mind. So a lot of submissions, a lot of mat work, but these two know how to do it. Kenta's hubris ended up costing him when he pulled Zack up from pin attempts a couple of times and ended up being submitted. But I enjoyed this match. It went 21-33. It was a long one, and it didn't feel long to me. It sailed right along, and I enjoyed it, and Zack gets a big win.
This was a fantastic match. There were parts of it that I did not like, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days. And the conclusion that I've come to is that I don't like the way that Kenta is wrestling right now. I believe that he's wrestling like he's furious with everything in the world, and not wrestling within the sphere of what he's supposed to be doing within New Japan. I feel like there's something outlying going on. Like he's just a mean cuss right now, and it's coming out in the matches, and it's making me somewhat uncomfortable. Rather than like I'm leaning in and enjoying it. I don't know if he's just doing a really good job with this character, or if he's just like, I'm going to hit you as hard as I can because it's the only thing I feel, kind of thing. Like, I just don't know.
Maybe that's it.
But there is something about his matches that, while authentic, feels somewhat off-putting to me, and I'm trying to put my finger on it. This was a fantastic match, but there's something about Kenta right now that is just like, what is going on with you? Because I'm not feeling great about watching you in the ring.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So,
and C block as a whole, I think, is the biggest toss-up block of the batch. It's the toughest one to call. So this result could end up being quite significant here. Sabre beating Kenta. So we'll see how that all plays out. So now it's Kenta that's behind the 8-ball, and Zack is in good shape.
He's in the driver's seat.
In the driver's seat. And we had the last match of the night, Juice Robinson beating Shingo Takagi by pinfall. If there's any proof, if you ever needed proof, that Gedo is behind the idea of this heel Juice Robinson, here it is. He defeated Shingo Takagi. This finish didn't go exactly as planned. That was clear. There was something there. Now, Juice, just had appendicitis, and that can affect your back. It can certainly affect your stamina. And he looked a little bit tired. It looked like he wasn't able to get Shingo up for that rock slide, the new rock slide move, which looks really good. So he had to go back to Pulp Friction again to get the finish. And it did look a little bit awkward. It looked like he tried to get the rock slide, couldn't quite do it, and had to audible over to a second Pulp Friction. And the thing about that is what they were trying to do, I'm sure, was say that, oh, Shingo kicked out of Pulp Friction, but now he has this new one, the rock slide, and it's kind of out with the old, in with the new. This is his finisher now. And unfortunately, they might have to save that one for another big match, which you can do. Yeah, I'm just glad Juice is all right. And it appears that he's fine and things. And it just looked like that finish didn't quite get to tell the story it wanted to. Nevertheless, he got what was probably he defeated Jay White for the U.S. title. That was a big one for Juice, but it's among his biggest wins. And he's certainly working very hard to get over as a heel. And I think he was effective.
It sure seems like he's the number 2 in Bullet Club now. And he is taking the character that he had and amping it up in a different way and escalating it that worked with Bullet Club. He's loud and obnoxious, but loud and obnoxious in a way that you want to revolt against. I commend him for coming back from appendicitis and performing. It's clear he was not ready to go, but there was a pressure and a legitimacy to being in G1. And, I'm sure he felt a lot of things, and, injuries in New Japan. We can spend an entire hour talking about that, but he felt compelled to come back. And as a result, he's been booked incredibly strong. He's still carrying the U.S. title that he technically does not own, or he's not the proper holder of that belt, Osprey.
Osprey's champ,
But we're getting to a point where he's going to be in a top role in New Japan for the next 2 or 3 years, and we just better get used to it. Hopefully he takes his game to the next level, because he's not main event Juice yet, but I would not put it past him to become that one point.
Yeah, I don't think he's all that far off. We'll see. And again, I just hope his health is okay. Coming back from appendicitis that quickly is tough. I'm sure his wind isn't 100% where it needs to be. And I'm just glad that they got through that one without any real issues, and he can go about his tournament now. And they made
it through the match.
Yeah, so, they did. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a bad match at all. It was pretty good.
No.
The fact that these shows are a little bit more spread out at the beginning of the tour could work to his benefit in his recovery.
100%.
It's not working every night. Now, preview tags, we can get through these very quickly. We'll just say that Finlay and Yoshihashi defeated Team Filthy. Royce Isaacs looked good in this. Lawler worked very hard. Bullet Club, El Fantasmo and Bad Luck Fale defeated Taka Michinoku and Lance Archer. Of course, that was Taka doing the job. United Empire defeated the House of Torture. Dick Togo was in it, so you knew that he was going to be the victim. And sure enough, they were getting over the NRA's Full Nelson. They're working very hard on this in every match. And let's see, Chase Owens and Jay White defeated Jado and Tamatonga by pinfall. Jado was the one that lost that one. And I noticed this one, the Chaos match, which was Okada and Goto and Hiroshi Tanahashi beating LIJ, which was Bushi, Sonata, and Naito. Of course, Bushi was the victim there. And I just noticed that they were being very careful in this one. These are 6 guys that know what the G1 is, know how hard it is, even though whether there's 9 matches or 6. There's also, they know that there's no reason to just go crazy in a preview tag. So they did their stuff, but they were also very careful.
Not a single one of them had anything to prove in that match.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the other thing is, Kevin Kelly, bless his heart, Kevin Kelly kept slipping in the fact that Naito had beaten Goto. And of course, there's the preview for their match the next night. That Naito had beaten Goto 5 consecutive times. And that little Easter egg just slipped in there. If you're listening to the commentary, it's always worth listening to things like that, because that took us to night 3. So here we go into night 3, and we had some more pretty good tournament matches in this one. And the first one, however, was not one of them, Jeremy. This was a tough one. Yujiro Takahashi beating David Finlay by pinfall. he's got to win one. Like nobody really goes 0-9 unless it's a story. Like I think Tomoaki Honma did a little while ago, a few years ago, way back, like went 0-9, and then the next year went 0-8, and then won his last one, and it was just like the biggest celebration of the whole tournament was when he finally got a victory. They don't really do that anymore.
I'm ready to make you sad with this one.
Don't tell me you like this.
What are the chances that David Finlay has a worse record in the G1 than Yujiro Takahashi this year?
It's very possible this year. I mean, I don't think that they have a whole lot of steam behind him. I think that he's definitely there to get some guys wins, and so is Yujiro too. But they wrestle each other there. Of course, the best part of Yujiro's act is Peter. Let's be honest. Other than that, sure. it's just difficult to watch a Yujiro match for any length of time. And this one went 13 minutes, 12 minutes and 59 seconds. That's a long time to watch Yujiro Takahashi wrestle.
It was a wrenching experience, I will tell you that.
My goodness. How long have you been waiting for that one?
About 5 seconds.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness. I thought you were waiting and laying in wait.
Not at all.
With the wrench. So no, this one, Kevin Kelly at one point, he just cracks me up. It's like as if acknowledging what was going on, saying the crowd is whisper quiet for Yujiro's offense, and trying to put over that he's a heel and they don't like him, when really everyone's just going, "Oh my goodness, can this match end, please?" So yeah, you're right. Anyway, it was an Okada roll, a kick out. Finlay goes into the ropes. Sho is there with the wrench that the referee magically doesn't see. And it leads to Yujiro getting the pin. Tough break for David Finlay. Someone's got to lose to Yujiro, and I guess he got the short straw.
The tinfoil theory is that David Finlay will be working his way up New Japan after loudly claiming that he was looking forward to going to WWE at some point. So he's going to have some work ahead of him.
He definitely is. So, hey, the less said about that one, the better, because we were
he's a great candidate for the G1. I do not want to disparage him. He's earned his way into this, but, that doesn't mean he's going to be successful out the gate.
No, and he's not, this year in particular, he's not going to win a whole lot of matches, but hopefully he'll win one more than Yujiro does by the time it's all said and done.
Let's talk about the rest of the super amazing night.
Tamatonga defeated Chase Owens by pinfall. Of course, this is a grudge match. Tamatonga going with the Guerrillas of Destiny being kicked out, and Chase Owens siding with Jay White. So there was some personal issues here. It was all right. This wasn't bad at all. I like the use of Jado in preventing some heel tactics without burying the referee. So in this one, he was about to suplex Tamatonga on the exposed concrete, and without doing anything to Chase, Jado just put the mats back and distracted him. And he was like, what the heck are you doing? I'm putting the mats back. They're not supposed to be out here. And then when he went to grab a chair, Jado grabbed the chair, but didn't do anything to Chase. So I kind of like that, the idea of Jado, hey, I know all these tricks. I know how to counter them. That wasn't bad. Overall, this was fine, but these two aren't going to have the best match of the night against each other, but 13 minutes, 18 seconds, and Tamatonga got a much-needed win. This wasn't bad.
Look, it's 2022, and it's the year of Tamatonga's blood feud with the Bullet Club. So at opportune points throughout the entire year, he's going to have his moments of revenge. The first match of the G1 is against Bullet Club. His last match at the G1 presumably is against Bullet Club. He might advance to the next round, but at least in the bracket that we know of, he's got a Bullet Club feud. So, is he going to take down the top dog at some point? Maybe, maybe not. But he certainly should be taking down dogs within the Bullet Club when he gets to that point. So this was the right match to have. Chase Owens, he's at the David Finlay level, if not higher up. He has done work for New Japan for so many years that I'm not going to say a bad word about him. He's absolutely everything that New Japan wants, needs, and delivers when asked. And
he provides. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
He provides a very valuable service in that he can have good matches and lose falls and protect the top guys in Bullet Club. That's a valuable service for this guy. He keeps Jay White and Evil's shoulders off the mat, and now Juice's shoulders off the mat. Owens wrestles well. He can have good matches. So within that, and that's kind of what David Finlay is going to be for Hantai for a little while. It's what Aaron Hanare was for Hantai. It's what Bushi is for LIJ. Good matches, but you don't have to protect them. and yet they stay at about the same level, and they don't get and the crowd stays at least a little bit interested in him. So Chase is doing yeoman's work right there. This is what he needs to be doing.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was a fine match in the G1. No one's going to talk about it as their favorite match, but no one's going to be tearing it down either.
Next one was different. It's a big man match, and Bad Luck Fale doesn't get to have big man matches anymore in New Japan. There aren't any other really big guys, but this tournament, of course, he's in the monster block. So we had our first monster versus monster matchup here. Bad Luck Fale, Lance Archer. Fale wins this one by countout. They teased the count out earlier to the point that I thought somebody was going to get pinned, to be honest, because they did the Archer sliding in at 19.75 out of 20 after being slammed through the chairs on the floor. But in the end, they did go with the count out anyway. Gato loves a good count out in a Fale match in the G1. That's how Fale usually drops points in the G1. But they didn't pin either guy here. Fale wins by count out. It was okay, but it was just okay. I mean, both of these guys are pretty decent big men. I think Fale was enjoying the idea that he could have a big man match for once. It's been a long time since he could. No, this is fine.
They exist to serve as foils for a very specific individual in their bracket. And so this was a match that maybe 10, 20% of the G1 audience, like, I'm really looking forward to this mean guy match. But no, these men are designed. One of them might get a win over Okada. One of them might not. They might both, but they are there to exist as threats towards your top babyface. And if they're going to beat the crap out of each other before you get to that point, that's great for Okada, but they didn't really do that as much other than, go to the extent of trying to win, but neither one of them really seemed all that upset when they lost.
That's true. That's very true. All right, and the last one is the main event of the night, Hiro Okigodo against Tetsuya Naito. Now, this is kind of a match that you look at and you kind of circle on the calendar a little bit because these two do work well together. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it had the setup of the 5 consecutive singles wins by Naito that Kevin Kelly kept mentioning. And this was really good. Naito is a totally different worker than he was 4 years ago or even 3 years ago. Like, you can just see that because he's had so many issues with his knees, his shoulders, his joints. He doesn't work the same way, but it's getting to be like Tanahashi where he just works really, really intelligently. And this was a good match. I enjoyed this one. And the crowd seemed legitimately shocked when Godo especially got the Shotenkai, which is my favorite Godo move. I like it better than the GTR, although I understand it's more difficult to do, especially on taller guys. That suplex into the swinging slam thing. I just think it looks fantastic every time it's executed. And Naito took an excellent one here.
He's one of the only guys that don't do that move. So, you don't see Godo do it, you're not going to see it.
Yeah. And it's a really terrific move that Godo has there. And he only brings it out for the biggies, and this was worth it. And Godo gets his win. I think it surprised the fans in the building. I thought they thought they were going to see a Naito win. LIJ 0-3 to start off this thing. But overall, I thought this was a really good match. Again, Naito doesn't do everything that he used to do in the ring, but he is so smart about what he does that this still works.
By default, this was the best match of the night. But none of these matches really hit me the same way any of the matches the first two nights did. I was surprised legitimately that Godo won that match. And I thought about it a bit and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. All the top stars so far have all won their matches. There needs to be one of these, top contenders going into it that is, behind the 8 ball a little bit. So, you think about the fact that you're going to have 4 brackets and you can't have the same scenario going into all 4 brackets storytelling wise. So,
yeah,
if Naito is the one behind the 8 ball that is racing from behind to win through his bracket while all the other ones are either tied or, cruising into the finish line, that seems about right for Naito. They were really laying it heavy that this is his last chance to get in there. And, frankly speaking, a Naito story where he's close, but somebody takes it away from him at the very last minute, and that's his feud going into Wrestle Kingdom. That's probably about the level I'd want to have Naito at going into the future anyways.
There you go. Well, we'll see how it goes. Could be
Yeah,
a thing.
absolutely.
Especially if they keep mentioning that it's now or never for him, you begin to think that he's going to win the block in the end. It's just
it was like it came down to Zack Sabre Jr.
Yeah.
and Naito in that block for me. And then someone pointed out that Naito versus Osprey is a match that has very rarely, if ever, been done, and it's something that they've been saving for a very, very, very long special occasion.
That's
And
a good point.
That's something that this might be the window of time to make that happen.
All right, so we're going to quickly move through the prelim tags right here. This was a team TMDK. That was Jonah and Bad Dude Tito again. They defeated Team Filthy. That was Lawler and Isaacs.
I call this the strong match.
It was. Tito and Isaacs looked really good. Lawler worked super hard, and Jonah played cleanup and looked like a proper monster doing it. So this is exactly what it needed to be there. Isaacs doing the job. United Empire defeating Bullet Club later. Dick Togo again taking the full Nelson submission. Again, they're working very hard on that full Nelson, boy. You can't miss it. But he added lifting him up, kind of ragdolling him a little bit while in the move. They're working on this one pretty hard. And Henare, like I said, got the big win there against Tanahashi, so he's looking good going into match number 2. Chaos. Okada and Yoshihashi defeated Toru Yano and Oiwa. Of course, this is the preview for Okada and Yano. This was pretty much a standard match, with the exception of Yano and Okada worked very hard to look like they were pissed at each other at the end of this one. So whatever happens with that match, and it's probably going to be the worst Okada match in the entire tournament. It's not for lack of effort, because they both put a little extra steam on their confrontation in this.
They had a little bit of stink with each other for sure.
Yeah, it looked like there was maybe some sideways glances and words in the locker room or something that spilled over into the ring for that one. So that was fine. They did what they needed to do with it. And then Bullet Club, that was Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Kenta defeated Tanahashi, Ishii, and Fujita by submission. Of course, you can figure out what happened there. Fujita tapped out. But this was a terrific match, actually. This is a really good preview match. There's a lot of hair pulling early to protect Tanahashi from having to bump much. So when he was selling, they did a lot of the hair pulling bits. And then Jay White got too close to Fujita, who grabbed his hair to a huge pop. Like, the fans love that Fujita just went in and grabbed a hold of Jay White. Ishii got on a good tear. He had Jay and Kenta just beating the shit out of each other by having them dodge and crash into each other in a really kind of crisp and boom, boom, boom way. I enjoyed it. Fujita was good. Great heel work by Jay. I actually thought this was better than a couple of the tournament matches.
I agree. I have questions for you about this, but we'll go through the last one.
Okay, last one is LIJ defeating Suzuki Goon. That's Takagi, Sanada, and Bushi beating Sabre, Taichi, and Takamichi Noku. Takamichi Noku was the one that took a loss here. And this is in contrast to the Jonah Tito match against Lawler and Isaacs, in that the veterans, like we mentioned earlier, knew to take it easy. The new guys go wild trying to impress everyone, and it makes sense. It's their first run. They want to get over. These guys are already over, and they know exactly how to have a match in second, third gear, and just make sure that everybody sees a couple of the classic moves there that they want to see from these guys and get through it without an injury.
So I got a question for you about Jay White and Kenta. Their little conflict. News or noise?
I mean, it's something that they can keep kind of going back to and teasing. I think eventually, they could end up. Well, yeah, I mean, they're in different blocks, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
probably
right
noise. Yeah, probably noise.
But
probably
it could be news at some point.
That's always the question: is Bullet Club eventually going to splinter? I don't think House of Torture and Bullet Club will in the near future, but I think they definitely could out of ways. I think there's plenty to do with them as a unified front right now that they don't need to, but I think Gato's keeping that in his back pocket, and he's all about planting seeds that can take a long time to grow.
There's definitely going to be a conversation we're going to have next week when some of this stuff plays out about exactly what the relationship between Bullet Club and House of Torture is and where you see it going. But Instead of looking towards the future, let's talk about the past. Stephen Conway, you have a history lesson for us about
Got a little bit of a history. I'm going to make it quick today, but it is something that I wanted to go into. It was very obvious what the topic was going to be this time. It's the history of some tournaments going on. So there have been various tournaments in New Japan history. The G1 was not the first, wasn't even the second. The first one was called the World League, and it first one took place in 1974. So, of course, the company was founded in 72. Took them a little while to get going. We've mentioned in a previous history lesson that they had not the greatest star power as far as foreign talent goes at the very beginning as the company got itself established. But once it did start bringing in some bigger names from the United States to clash with the Japanese stars. And they had a World League tournament in 1974. So this is the precursor to the G1. We're also going to get into some of the others in the coming weeks. We've got a few weeks, so I'm just going to go through the history of kind of New Japan tournaments. And this one took place in April and May of 1974. They separated the wrestlers into a Japanese division and an international division. And in the end, this was overly complicated, something that they fixed in the following years. So the top four in each side, so the top four Japanese and the top four internationals, moved on to the second round. And what they did was the first round robin was actually all Japanese against international. So it wasn't like the blocks. It was like they had them in two blocks, but they wrestled each other in the first round. So the foreigners wrestled the Japanese, Japanese wrestled the foreigners. In the end, you had Seiji Sakaguchi edged out Antonio Inoki for first and second place. Masa Saito and Hoshino were the four Japanese that moved on to the next round. The internationals were, get this, the top point getter, Jeremy, Killer Karl Krupp. Always good to have a Nazi in there. You know what?
I'm sorry.
And here you go.
Completely off guard.
And here's where it gets strange, Jeremy. The Nazi is the second worst guy on the international tour. And of course, Killer Karl Krupp was not actually a Nazi. I understand this.
No,
but the next guy was actually a steaming piece of shit human being. The second place in international guy, foreigner, was Invader number one, Jose Gonzalez, the man that would go on to murder Bruiser Brody in a Puerto Rican dressing room. So he was, of course, that's years before all that happened. Still a piece of shit, Gonzalez. I'll
allow it.
Murderer. And got away with it too. It's the worst. And Karl Krupp, Invader number one, Stan Stasiak, former WWF World Heavyweight Champion, Gito Mongol. So Gito Mongol was a wrestler who was one half of the Mongols tag team. His partner was Beppo Mongol. Try not to giggle too much. We're saying those names.
The time.
Do you know who Beppo Mongol was?
I don't. So you're gonna have to tell me.
They were WWF tag team champions 2 times. He was Nikolai Volkov before he was Nikolai. So there you go. Yeah,
probably in his prime doing it too.
He was pretty, I mean, they were a powerhouse heel team, and that was in Volkov's powerlifting days. I just call him Volkov because, geez, he was for like 30 years. But the Mongols were a tag team. I believe they were managed by Albano, but don't quote me on that one off the top of my head. But anyway, they were there. Khosrow Vaziri, the Iron Sheik, was in this tournament, as was Bolo Mongol. So Beppo was not brought in, but Guido and Bolo Mongol was Bill Eadie, also known as the Masked Superstar, also known as Axe from Demolition. So some pretty darn good foreign talent by 1974, Jeremy, and that was that. Now, Inoki, Sakaguchi, and Krupp. Pardon me. So to get ahead of myself. So the 4 internationals and the 4 Japanese that advanced out of this thing then went into another 8-man round robin tournament. Inoki, Sakaguchi, and Krupp all ended up tied. So they went into a 3-way tie-breaking match at the Metropolitan Gym in Tokyo, and that was the one that Inoki ended up winning. So Inoki, the owner, operator, and biggest star, won the very first tournament. But boy, this was convoluted. I mean, you had the 2 different rounds of round robin and then a 3-way tiebreaker where they had 3 singles matches in one night and they all wrestled triangle. But they simplified things in 1975. Now I'll get through the rest of these a lot quicker, but they ditched the international versus Japanese format the second year. This time the top 5 advanced to a single elimination tournament. Top 5 in a single elimination? Well, here's how they did it. Top finisher, the guy with the most points, advanced all the way to the finals. The other 4 had a final 4 to see who met him.
Oh, that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah, you're rewarded for winning the regular season, so to speak.
Yeah.
Once again, top foreign star Killer Karl Krupp. He got the bye. He went all the way into the finals. If you've ever watched Karl Krupp wrestle, you don't need him doing 2 more matches. Just saying. Yeah. He was a classic kick and stomp heel, as they say.
Less is more kind of wrestler.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He was a hell of a ring entrance. Believe me. I'm sure. And actually a good promo, by the way, too. He was a pretty good promo.
You have to be if you're not that great in the ring between the promo, the act, and the entrance. Something has to be working.
He did really good stuff with Jerry Lawler in Memphis and things. That kind of over-the-top character works in those situations. So Krupp got the bye. Inoki defeated Strong Kobayashi in the semifinals. Seiji Sakaguchi and Kentaro Oki went to a double disqualification. So that allowed Inoki to advance all the way to the finals. He defeated Krupp. And the only other foreign name that was interesting in this one was there was a Super Destroyer. Now, there is a long list of men who have been the Super Destroyer in pro wrestling over the years. This one was Don Jardine, who wrestled as the Spoiler in almost every territory in the world in the 80s. Don Jardine, a heck of a worker. And this time he was the Super Destroyer. Man Mountain Mike was also in that one. So, again, still a little convoluted, Jeremy. There's a lot of moving parts in that one and different levels and different rounds. 1976, they just had a round-robin tournament. Top 2 finishers went to the finals. Sounding a little more familiar?
Mm-hmm.
This one, Pedro Morales, former WWF champion. He won, had the highest point totals. He went right into the finals. But Inoki could not quite get away from the round robins. The man loved him. So Sakaguchi, Victor Rivera, and Killer Karl Krupp, again, tied for second most. So they had a 3-way round robin to decide who wrestled Pedro Morales. Sakaguchi won that, but Morales defeated him in the finals by countout. So Pedro Morales, the first person not named, he was the first person to win the tournament that didn't also own the company.
I mean, that's a fine,
nice distinction.
Fine distinction.
Yeah. 1977, the Masked Superstar got his victory over Sakaguchi. Tony Charles, Johnny Powers, and Nikolai Volkov as himself, not as Beppo Mongol were the other big foreigners. In 1978, they changed the tournament over to the MSG League, named it after the Madison Square Garden League. Again, you see that a couple of early WWF champions were part of these. WWF had a working relationship with Inoki fairly early. Of course, famously, Bruno Sammartino only worked for Giant Baba, was loyal to Baba from the JWA days in the 1960s, but Vince McMahon Sr. had a relationship with Inoki. So there was a mystique even in Japan about Madison Square Garden. So they would have things like the Madison Square Garden series. That was one of the tours each year. And then in 1978, they changed the name of the tournament to the MSG League. And we will talk more about that next week.
Nice. So we're going to go over the just a quick give you the results of the New Japan Strong from last week, which was Dark Order lost to the Aussie Open in the main event. Stray Dog Army defeated Midnight Heat in that side of the Strong tag title bracket. And a very quiet match that didn't get any attention at all was Filthy Tom Lawler versus Bad Dude Tito in a singles match in which those two tore the house down in their showing that they did. And it was the match in between the 2 tag tournament matches. Highly recommended. As for next week, we have the semifinal matches of Christopher Daniels and Yuya Uemura versus Shane Haste and Mikey Nichols. And then the week after will be Aussie Open, Kyle Fletcher, and Mark Davis, and they will face off Stray Dog Army. The winners of those 2 matches will face off each other in a taped match this Sunday, Charlotte, at the High Alert event.
How are Daniels and Uemura looking as a team?
They're okay. They don't really strike me as a cohesive unit that will be going forward. but having Yuya Uemura with Christopher Daniels is certainly a combination that works well for the strong profile. So we have a couple of matches that we're going to talk about in the preview for next week.
Yeah.
We will be back next Thursday, and the matches that we will be covering at that time are going to be on July 23rd. Tomohiro Ishii versus Jay White, Yoshihashi versus Shingo Takagi, Kazuchika Okada versus Toru Yano, and Zack Sabre Jr. versus Aaron Henare. On the 24th, we have Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Tetsuya Naito, El Fantasmo versus Yujiro Takahashi, Jeff Cobb versus Bad Luck Fale, and Sanada versus Taichi. Do any matches on there sound like the ones that you would think match to watch that night? For me, Ishii versus Jay White, and Tanahashi versus Naito is always a...
Certainly. Yeah, those jump out. I'll tell you what, the sleeper pick there is Zack Sabre Jr. and Aaron Henare could be very interesting. I'm curious to see how those two work together.
I think you're right. I think that's going to be a good one. There are going to be two more nights that we're going to cover, and they are the 26th and the 27th, both at Corkin Hall. Kenta versus Evil. That one I'm circling is a very interesting match to watch. Mm-hmm. David Finlay versus Juice Robinson, also a very interesting match to watch. Tom Lawler versus Lance Archer, and the Great O-Khan versus Chase Owens. This is going to be a sleeper night for matches, and we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to have Toru Yano versus Bad Luck Fale, Okigodo versus Aaron Henare, Tomohiro Ishii versus Tamatonga, and Will Osprey versus Yujiro Takahashi.
We're going to find out how good Will is that night, I tell you. The tag team clash, the Finn Juice clash, should be interesting. I mean, both of those guys are going to work very hard against each other in that match. That's main eventing one of the nights at Corkin Hall. All four of these nights are in metropolitan Tokyo. So if you're in Metro Tokyo, it's a good week to be a New Japan fan. And Sanada and Taichi, that's actually an Oda also I had my eye on. I'll bet those two are going to pull out a pretty good one right there. But Finlay versus Juice, I'm intrigued by. The rest of them are all like, I'm looking at these and just thinking it's going to be interesting to see how Tom Lawler does against Archer. It's going to be his first tournament match against Archer. We're, like I said, Osprey has Yujiro. Shingo has I'm looking at there. Shingo against Yoshihashi, so some of these really big time workers are in matches that aren't necessarily designed to be all world matches, but they still need to pull something out. I'm curious to see how they do that.
The Kenta versus Evil match is definitely the one where I want to see exactly what the relationship. They seem like they're all working together. House of Torture and Bullet Club with El Fantasma teaming up with House of Torture. But they are hinting that maybe not everything is great, and so if anything's going to happen, it's going to start with there. So that could be a fun one to do.
They like to tease collusion. They do it all the time when two Bullet Club members they always tease that there's going to be some kind of collusion, then they end up turning on each other and having a match. So I expect something like that too, where they're just like, "Aren't you going to lay down for me?" No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Well, I think that pretty much covers everything that we're going to talk about, Stephen Conway. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about before we go?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that Bullet Club and House of Torture thing develops. If they're going to do that, I still feel like it's a little bit early, but maybe Gedo disagrees. And maybe we're going to see a little bit of that that fissure beginning to build between those two little subsets of Bullet Club. I'm also curious to see where United Empire is going to land on the babyface heel scale. I'm not totally sure where this faction is right now.
We're going to more of that next week. Them and Suzuki are playing this role right in the middle. You have a very clear set of faces with Chaos and LIJ, and then you have House of Torture and Bullet Club on the other side. And then you have a couple of these stables right in the middle that are just kind of, we're going to make you whatever needs to work for this match.
And we'll see how it turns out. Can LIJ make any kind of a comeback? It's going to be interesting to see. So with that in mind, anything else to add, Jeremy, or you want to go right to your socials?
I'll just go right to the socials. You can find me at Jer Finestone on Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook in the Fight Game Media podcast Facebook group. Those are pretty much the only two places I spend any time online. So if you want to have at me, besides the comments on YouTube when we post this, you know where to find me.
All right. And I'm Stephen Conway. I'm Stephen Conway 88 on Twitter. And I'm also the writer-editor of RingsideReplay.com and a contributor to Fight Game Media. Ringside Replay, we just updated it with some things about the Sam Mushnick retirement show in 1981, a fantastic night of wrestling there at the Checker Dome in St. Louis, a historic night, New Year's Day 1982, so check that out. And make sure you check out the other shows here on the Fight Game Media YouTube feed. Don't forget to look at the podcast, the Patreon, all of those things cover everything in pro wrestling. I do mean everything in combat sports, boxing, MMA, pro wrestling. Check it out. If you like it, we're covering it. 2 people in a ring. We got it covered. Joshi, all of it. So thank you for joining us again. For Jeremy Feinstone, I'm Stephen Conway. We'll be back next week to talk more G1, more New Japan Pro Wrestling. We look forward to seeing you then.
Take care.